Hello everyone, and welcome to Linda's Who Plants For You. Today I'm going to do a video someone has requested of me, several people actually, and one of them is my daughter. And this is really for new plant moms and dads that really are struggling with the different terminology in the plant world. And today I'm going to talk about watering, because that seems to be the biggest one that's got the most confusion about it. But I want to start off by saying I am not an expert on this subject. I have learned over the years, many years of raising plants myself, and to be honest with you, I'm still learning. I still, every once in a while, obtain another type of plant that I haven't had before, and it sometimes throws me for a loop until I figure out what its needs are. So I want to just put that out there first. And that being said, one of the things she asked me to explain was the term evenly moist soil. That is a relative term, and it's because it depends on your definition of evenly moist. I have seen people describe it as if you can touch the soil and you pick your finger up and there's soil on it, that's evenly moist. I have seen people say if you stick your finger down in the soil and pull it out and there's still soil on it, that can be evenly moist. So I understand why there's a lot of confusion. But let me say this. When you get a new plant, you're going to be looking at it a lot because it's new. So pay very close attention. Your plants will tell you. You can learn a lot from the plant itself. One of the things that I learned early on was my peace lily. Now, I had a huge peace lily years ago, and it did not act the same as the one that I have now. So there is so much involved in watering. It depends on the humidity in your home. And let me just say, my mom only lives a few miles away from me, but when they say on the news, the humidity is down, it's a beautiful day, we've only got 40% humidity, I can go out on my porch with the hygrometer and have 60% humidity. And the reason for that is we're surrounded by a lot of water, okay? And that's going to raise the humidity in your air. Same with rain, snow, when we get precipitation. I cannot tell you how different it can be just a few miles away, sometimes just across the street. I've sat in my living room sometimes and watched it rain on halfway down from the middle of our lot going south, and then from the middle of our lot going north, it's dry. So everything is relative to your particular situation, your home. I would strongly suggest if you have plants that need high humidity, that you invest in a hygrometer. I got one. It's I believe it's Honeywell, and I believe I paid about $10 or $12 for it, and it's been a real lifesaver for me. It gives you the temperature and the humidity. Now, that being said, there are people who I have heard say certain plants need very high humidity. One of those species of plants, if you will, has been the Calathea family. I have not found that to be true. So even when I look at my humidity level, and it's in the wintertime and it's 45 or 41 or 42%, my Calatheas are fine. Now, do I ever get any kind of crispy edges? Once in a great while, I'll see a little tiny bit on the edge of one leaf, and that's usually in conjunction with I let it go too long before I watered it. Um, and again, I'm not saying that they don't need humidity. I'm just saying in my experience, that has not been the case. So I'm not sure what to say about that. And I guess getting back to the soil here, if you have a plant, when you receive a plant or you purchase a plant, the very first thing you should do is research it. And I still do that, even if it's a plant that I already own or that I've had before. Um, I will look it up and research it to make sure that I'm doing things the way I should be for that particular plant. Um, and usually that's if it's a kind of an exotic type plant that I, just not familiar with. But most of my plants that I own, I have pretty well down pat. And even then, I sometimes have watering issues. There are some plants that, like my Pilea peperomoides, that plant I have in a clay pot. And the reason being is because she can be overwatered very, very easily. And any plant that has tuberous roots or thick leaves where they hold the water, any kind of succulent, and you can tell that by the if the leaves are thick and they're holding water, your jade plants, your I'm staring at the plant right now, the burrow's tail, and in front of me I have cactus. Now, these cactus, I can let them go forever without water, and they don't die, but they get thin and dull looking, and they start to droop. When I'm on top of things and I'm watering them on a regular basis, they start to stand up, they get little blooms like this one is getting right now, and if I continue to take really good care of it, I'm going to have flowers. And I don't have to put it in a cold, dark place to get it to bloom, which is what you'll find all over the internet if you look it up. So again, I just keeping a close eye on your plants, and if you're going to own plants, that is something you're going to have to unfortunately learn to do. Plants are kind of like kids, and please don't bombard me with comments, because I have kids and I have plants and I understand the difference. But I'm trying to give you an analogy here that plants are living, breathing things. They drink, they eat, they need nutrition, just like a human. So if you're going to have plants, you're going to have to, succumb to the fact that you're going to have to be on top of it and take care of them if you want them to thrive. Now, you can have plants, and you can keep them alive by throwing a little water at them now and then. Most plants will survive, but they're not going to look like you want them to look. They're not going to thrive. They're not going to produce. You're not going to get the big, huge leaves like other people have, and things like that are going to suffer if you don't take good care of them. So, first and foremost, that's what you need to keep in mind. Then, like I said, when you get a plant, if it says evenly moist, all these tags, and they kill me because some of them are dead wrong that they stick in these plants. They don't even have the name of the plant, and the tag in there says to, keep evenly moist, or do not allow to dry out, or needs very moist conditions. Very often those tags are wrong, dead wrong, and so I don't pay any attention to them. I research. And by research, I mean I go on YouTube. Sometimes I just Google the plant, and hopefully the name of the plant will be correct from the store you're getting it, because that's also been an issue. But for the most part, and years ago, I was a chronic overwaterer, and I killed more plants by overwatering that I corrected myself, almost overcorrected to the fault of underwatering. But usually if you underwater, you can bring that plant back. If you overwater a plant and you don't catch it, by the time you realize you did that, it's usually too late. So I personally, I'd rather err on the side of underwater. when they say to let the plant get on the dry side, what does that mean? If you've got a plant in a pot that's 12 inches tall, and you stick your finger in there, which is maybe what, 3.5, 4 inches at the most, how do you know, and you pull it out and it's dry, nothing's sticking to it, so you're assuming it's dry and it needs water. I've done this. I've had this issue, only to find out that those roots are really a lot down a lot further than I thought they were, and they're in the part that's still moist. So when I have real big pots, if I have plants that I cherish and that I don't want to mess up, I use my moisture meter. And I'm going to just grab that because I want to show it to you. Okay. And here is my moisture meter. And this is a good one because it gives you your pH balance and your moisture level and your light. And so if you're interested in knowing those things, then that's something you might want to purchase. I think I paid $12 for this at Lowe's. I'm sorry, Menards. I got this at Menards. They do also sell these that are just moisture meters, and those might be easier for you to use. But on there you'll see the different segments, and then there's a little button right there that if you put it on moisture, it'll read the moisture. If you put it on light, it'll read the light. If you put it on pH, it'll read that. So this is a good tool to have when you have a deep pot, because you can't obviously get your hand all the way down to the bottom of that pot. And if you have the top 2 or 3 inches are dry, but the bottom 4 or 5, 6 inches are still quite damp, obviously you don't want to water that. There are exceptions to that. There are some plants that like to be kept evenly moist, and those are the ones you got to be really careful with, because not only do you risk rotting the roots, but it also attracts fungus gnats. So I don't know if this is helping or making things more complicated for you all, but I'm hoping I'm helping. I'm hoping that I'm trying to convey one thought here, and that is the best way is if you listen to other people and they say, you know, this plant needs to be kept this way. I've done that, and folks, I hate to say anything negative, especially in my YouTube plant world, because everyone in this community, plant community, well, most people are very kind, and it's a wonderful place for me to be. But unfortunately, there have been times when I was just taken back. I really had to take a deep breath and calm myself down, because I heard information that I knew if the people followed that, it was going to kill their plant eventually. So don't just take one person's word for anything. Please do the research, okay? And remember, the plants that have tuberous roots, and if you don't know if it does or not, take it out of the soil and look at it. Those are the opposite of the real fine roots. Tuberous roots hold water. Spider plant is one of them. The ZZ plant is another one. If you take that out of the dirt, you'll see there's little balls, and those hold water. So your ZZ plant, and I should say at this point, that's another issue. And let's just go over to that ZZ plant here. I happen to have one on my TV right now that it's not supposed to be there. I had to put it there because I'm cleaning my other space, and I had to have just a place to set it for now. So I have it there. This plant, they did an experiment on this, and they put it in a closet for a month, and they took it out, and there was nothing wrong with it. Now, I wouldn't suggest doing that, but that tells you a lot about this plant. It doesn't need to be watered hardly ever, and although the leaves will get darker green and more beautiful in a brighter light, because they're getting more food from the sun or the light. They're getting the photosynthesis that it needs. However, these plants can grow in pretty dark corners of the room as well, and not be any worse for wear. So when you have a plant like that, you obviously do not want to water that because it's not using the water. It's not. Plants that need high light also needs more water, because the light is, they're working, they're absorbing that light, they're going through the process of photosynthesis, and they're using that energy, so they need the water to keep them going, to keep them strong. So that's pretty much the difference. So if you've got plants that have sorry about that, tuberous roots, you want to be very sparingly on the watering, okay? Very sparingly. And I'm just going to set you up right here for a minute. If you have fine roots, fine thin roots, the other thing I want to mention here is water a little. You don't need to put the water in the pot and wait for it to drain through the bottom. That is not necessary on most plants. Now, there are occasions when I do that, but it's really pretty rare, because if it's coming through the bottom, that tells you all the soil, received some water, so you didn't miss any roots. So that's I think why people do that. But that has caused me issues in the past. So there are some plants that I do water that way, but very few, and not very often. There are times when I have a plant that I know needs a really good drink, and then I will do that. But then I'll leave it sit for a half an hour to an hour, and if there's still water sitting in the tray, I dump it. So when I water, and I think, and I forget her name, she's from a tropical plant addict. She's just a sweetheart. She's from the UK, and she's got beautiful plants, inside and out, and she's just very easy to listen to as well. So go to Tropical Plant Addicts, and you might get some good information from her. Her plants, when she waters, I've heard her say a couple of times, she only puts a little bit. She waters more often and not as much. Some of us water less often, but we put more water in. And either way works if you know your plant and you know how much water your plant needs and how much it drinks. But there again, it really just depends. So, Trisha, if you're watching this, I know this sounds confusing, and I know I've said it a million times, but I just don't know how else to explain it to people. There is no one pat answer coming from any source that's going to be able to, where you can have like a chart and say, well, okay, I have this, and this plant. This is how often I water it, and this is how much I give it. It doesn't exist. And if it does, I can't imagine how that works, because everybody's home is different, everybody's atmosphere is different, everybody's lighting is different, and your soil mixture, that's another very important factor here. If you've got soil, and I've seen people who take the soil right out of the bag and they plant their plants in it, and their plants are beautiful, they're doing great. But that doesn't work for me. If I do that, I have all kinds of problems. So I amend my soils, and I always have, by the way. I use perlite and just different things. Sometimes I use charcoal. I use gravel. I use sand. It just depends on the plant. I did, however, stop using orchid bark. And the reason for that is I do believe that might be a fungus gnat attractant. And I'm not sure about it, I may be totally wrong and totally off the wall, but I'm doing an experiment here. Because when you water a plant, and if it's one that needs to, it's a high water, a high feeder, that bark is going to stay wet. It's in the soil. It's going to take forever to dry out. So that being the case, you're going to have wet, rotting wood in the soil, that's exactly what the fungus gnats go after. And I'm wondering if that hasn't been my issue, because like I said many times years ago, I never even heard of fungus gnats. Never ever even heard of them. Nobody that I knew had them. But now all of a sudden they're becoming a big thing, and I'm wondering if that isn't part of the problem, but I don't know for sure. Okay, and last but not least, when it comes to watering, I only use distilled water on certain plants of mine. One of them is my father's plant from his wake, my peace lily. And actually, I have 2 other peace lilies that I use my tap water, and they're not bothered by it. So, again, sometimes you can have the same plant and they like different things. My calathea, my calatheas and my maranta, I would never ever use anything but. And the few times I have, I paid for it. So, distilled water, I cannot stress enough how much that has changed my calathea family. How, much better it is for them than the tap water. And then, so because I saw such a big change in them, I decided maybe I better use that on my my begonias. So, see if I can get this light out of the way here. As you can see, I've got quite a few cane begonias here. I've also got some Rex begonias not doing real hot. And I'm thinking about getting out of the Rex begonia business because they're such divas and they don't give me near the pleasure that I used to get, that I now get out of my cane begonias. They grow so fast and they're so beautiful. And on those plants I do use distilled water as well. But, like I said, most of my plants I use the tap water, and when I do, what I've been doing is putting it in a container and adding a little bit of hydrogen peroxide and shaking it up and letting it sit overnight. And that seems to be working okay. So the rest of my plants are doing really pretty good. Let me just show you my my pinstripe, my ornata, my calathea ornata. Hopefully you guys can see that. I got another new leaf, folks. And if you want to hear the story about that, if you haven't already, you might go back and look at some of my older videos, because this one almost died. It was down to 1 leaf, and I now have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and a new one coming up. It's doing absolutely beautiful. Coming back. Okay. So, and that, my lemon lime right above it. Alright, well, I don't want this to get too long. I hope that I've answered your questions regarding watering. Like I said, the tap water, I have been using it on some of my bigger plants, my older plants, like my monstera. You can see the size of those leaves. And I'm using regular tap water. And just ignore that ugly, awful fly strip. I need my husband to climb up and get that down. He put that up there when we had an outbreak of fungus gnats, because neither one of us can share a home with those little buggers, so he goes, he declares war. And that's one of the things that we use, and it works really good. But look at the leaves on I have 2 monsteras, and the leaves on them are just absolutely gorgeous. And I'm using tap water, but again, I am adding a little bit of hydrogen peroxide. I'd say for a gallon of water, about a half a cup of hydrogen peroxide would do. Maybe even a cup. You could probably even use a cup. It isn't going to hurt your plants. And it also adds oxygen to the soil. And hydrogen peroxide is very cheap. You can get it at the dollar store for $1, so it goes a long way. Alright, I think that's it for the watering. Making sure, again, just keep in mind that plants that need more sun are going to need more water. They're going to dry out quicker. And I think that's it. If you have any other questions, I know, Trisha, you were asking about terms and terminology that the plant world uses. Don't worry about those terms. They're not important. What's important is just to pay attention to your plant, and your plant will tell you what it needs, okay? I'm going to try to do a video on lighting as well. And again, I am not an expert on that, but I have some comments about it, and I think some helpful hints. And I also have some questions for others. So I'm hoping that I'll be able to do that video soon. And in the meantime, I hope you all have a great day. It's not so nice here today. It's rainy and cloudy, and we just had some wind through here that looked like a tornado. I imagine that's coming from that hurricane. But thank God we're not in the midst of that. So hope you all have a great day, and I hope you'll all come back. Thank you. Bye now.